Hey PoE homies, Jay War here with another video. So today we're talking about our 319 League starter builds. Now, a couple things I want to mention here. This isn't a complete compilation of every build that's going to be good in 319. These are just the best that I could think of and get information for easily and provide to you guys. So, if your build isn't included here, don't be offended. It's not that you don't have a good build, it's just these are the ones I decided to include based upon a few things like availability of information, other stuff like that. So, another thing we're going to talk about. These builds are all ready to go for 319. You might hear me say a couple times in the video, because some of the recordings were done before the patch notes, that we're going to see what happens in patch notes. This is after patch notes. I've eliminated any build that wasn't viable in 319 because of nerfs. So all the builds in here are good to go. Another thing to mention with that though is there may need to be some adjustments made to the builds because the content creators for the resources for these builds haven't had time to update them yet, as this video is coming out pretty soon after the 319 patch notes and changes. So just make sure you keep up with the content creator whose guide you're looking for the build or anything like that, just to make adjustments for things like mana reservation efficiency nerf that we saw in the balance manifesto, and a couple other things that could be adjusted based upon a new unique item being better for the build, and some other things like that. But the core concept of the ascendancy and the skill gem with everything else related to the build is good to go for 319. So alright, all that being said, let's get into it. Alright guys, so first build up here is going to be Explosive Arrow Elementalist by Crouching Tuna and Palsteron. So really great league starter here. I think it's been popular for the past couple leagues. Yeah, fantastic. It's just really solid all-round build, and this is almost the definition of a good league starter here. It's kind of just got everything. It's pretty tanky. You're not going to die a whole lot. It takes down bosses relatively well, and it can map pretty good, right? So it's just really solid all-around build, and it can fly through the game on a little to no budget. There are some nuances to things you want to do with the gear that can be a little bit new player unfriendly, as I'm pretty sure there's some kind of attack speed threshold you want to stay over or under. I can't remember exactly how it works, but you want to make sure you hit a certain attack speed threshold and not go over it, because the build operates by, as you can see on the screen here, putting out these fusings fired from your ballista totems, and then they kind of flash for a second and then explode, and the damage is going to be based upon the number of fusings that you can put on a target. And when you're bossing, it's very important to have the right number go on there, because if you fire too slow, you're not going to be putting enough fusings on it. So it's very delicate there with the way it operates. And then there's this other mechanic with Elemental Equilibrium, which is a massive boost to your damage, which you want to make sure you get that right. And I believe you have to make sure you hit with cold or lightning damage, and then with the actual hit, and then the ignite is going to do fire damage, and Elemental Equilibrium is going to scale your fire damage because you're hitting with cold or lightning damage. So you got to have some kind of form of either elemental damage with attacks, or lightning damage, or cold damage with attacks, so that your fire damage does a lot more, right? And as you can see here, pretty good single target and pretty good clear speed. It's probably one of the slower clear speed builds here, just as a disclaimer for this build, but it's definitely a very solid league starter. One more thing I suppose we should talk about is the scaling. Unfortunately, Explosive Arrow Elementalist does not scale super well into the late game. If you're playing this build a month into the league, you probably want to switch into something a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient. And I think, you know, even Crouching Tuna and Palsteron, they may have started with this and then done that same thing when they played it, I believe, the last couple leagues, or at least an Arch Nemesis. I can't remember exactly when they played it. But yeah, it's not the best scaling build. It can just get the job done, and they kind of want to switch it into something else after this. Not going to be a build you want to play, just because really the mapping speed is a little bit slow compared to some other things, right? But it's a really strong build, and definitely one I would recommend. Alright guys, up next we got a General's Cry Blade Flurry Berserker. This is Path of Math's Blade Flurry General's Cry build. It's really good. I've really started this a couple leagues now. The one thing is it does take a number of uniques, kind of usually expensive uniques at league start to get going. You do need a Red Blade Banner. You're going to want an Abyssus as well. Helmets, Red Blade Banner Shield, which is usually probably one of the more expensive ones, usually like maybe 1 to 3 exalts the first couple days of the league. Very high demand of shield usually, partially because of this build. Ichimonji Sword as well, which is pretty cheap. And then Arislata's Coil, which is not really mandatory, but you definitely want to have that by the time you get into maps, which that's probably going to be anywhere from 1 maybe 2 Exalts. The Fizz damage attack builds haven't been too popular lately, but we'll see what happens with 3.19. I don't think this build is in any danger of getting nerfed going into 3.19, but we might see a meta change that'll make those items more expensive at worst case scenario, right? So just a couple notes in the build, a couple things I have to say about it. It's pretty squishy. You don't want to play it like a melee build. Essentially, the way this build works is you summon up Mirage Warriors, and you might see Cyclone going on here, but you don't really need to hit anything with Cyclone. Cyclone is really just there because you're going to use Cast while channeling with Cyclone, because of the channeling skill, and Desecrate. So you can notice the green kind of clouds around the character all the time. That's the Desecrate coming out, and you're spawning your Mirage Warriors off of the Desecrate, and other corpses, really, once you get going killing some stuff. But that's how you get going, right, is you gotta have some corpses down to start killing things, and that's the Desecrate constantly going off, which provides a couple other nice quality of life things with the build to have the corpses, because you can consume corpses for life using, I think it's Katava's Thirst. Small cluster jewel, once you get a little more investment. Definitely a really good league starter. This build scales insanely well with like a Paradoxica if you want to play this later in the league. It doesn't really get too much tankier. The main thing it could do is it just can melt bosses, as you're going to have upwards of, I don't know, 50, 100 million DPS on this build. Eventually you could get relatively easily with not too much gear investment, but it does take quite a lot of uniques to get going, right? So, really solid build in that regard. It's a pretty fast mapper. The clear on it is a little sloppy, as you can see. It doesn't quite blow up whole packs like something like, I don't know, like a Bane Occultist might do. You summon up, I think it's 5 or 6 Mirage Warriors, and they channel Blade Flurry on whatever they're closest to, so they don't always, you can't really tell them what to hit. It's kind of just whatever they spawn up around, they're going to target, and sometimes they all target the same thing or don't target enough different things, and the clear could be a little bit sloppy, but it's very fast regardless, right? And the main thing it's going to be good at is taking down bosses super quick, because you might notice it doesn't look like a lot of damage sometimes because your 6 Mirage Warriors, or 5, I can't remember how many it is exactly, are hitting different things, right? So it doesn't look like it's really doing a massive amount of damage sometimes on the clear with big packs. But when they're all targeting one thing, when you're in a boss room, just single target on a boss, it shreds bosses. So it's really good for bossing, and the only downside is it's a little squishy, right? The build can die kind of easily, but as you can see in this map, you know, I think this is a tier 16 map, I think we're doing here, and the showcase, and yeah, it's got no problems. That's the other thing I should mention with this build, is it can basically, once you get those items, and what I typically do with this build is I do infinite heist, and I just get all those uniques the first night. I'll buy them. They'll be expensive, and they're probably more expensive than what is reasonable, but it's because they're in such high demand. And once you get them on this build, you can do the whole game on this build, no question. But you have to kind of get that cost of entry out of the way with those uniques and pay like anywhere from probably 5 exalts, maybe 6 exalts for those key uniques you need with a Red Blade Banner, Rislatha's Coil, Abyssus, a 6th link, and all that stuff out of the way early once you get it. But once you get those, you are good to go. This will just roll pretty much the whole game. I've tested this build extensively on what it can handle on this amount of gear, and you should be able to do Uber Elder no problem. You should be able to do Maven. If you're pretty good at doing Maven, it's a little more of a tricky fight for this build, but you know, you should be able to get those down, get all your Void Stones, no problem on this build. Alright guys, so next build we have here is going to be Righteous Fire Inquisitor. Now this is a build from Pohx, and I will say, just to start things off, that Pohx has made the best build guide I've ever seen for a build in Path of Exile with this Righteous Fire Inquisitor. So if you're a new player and you want an extremely in-depth guide, this is going to be a very good build to go with. It's very tanky as well, which is another good thing for new players, because you can kind of just face tank mechanics. You don't really have to worry about dodging too much. You don't have to know everything that's coming at you, because anything that hits you will kill you kind of build. It's very tanky, can face tank a lot of stuff, like I said. So the other pros of this build is it did get a slight nerf in the Balance Manifesto, but it's going to be just fine. I think somebody said it was going to be about a 20% nerf. One of the PoE nerds that was more familiar with Righteous Fire than myself said it's only going to be about a 20% nerf in the end, which will be absolutely fine for Righteous Fire. Righteous Fire's strength isn't single target anyway, it's more of its clear speed. And by the way, the gameplay in this video here is a little bit scuffed. I just kind of threw together a super early game Righteous Fire build, just kind of show the some clips of the gameplay. It's normally much faster than this, but that's basically just what the skill looks like. You have a nice big fire ring around you. You have it always on, you don't have to press any buttons to keep it activated, so it's super nice for that like kind of lazy style of play. And then your single target is going to come from Fire Trap, which is, I don't know if you can see, the little trap you throw down and creates like kind of burning ground in an area and does a dot, which is going to be scaled off ignite damage as well, which ignite damage is scaled off of burning damage, which is scaled off of things like fire damage over time multiplier, and burning damage, which is the same thing you scale righteous fire with. So you kind of scale both of them at the same time. You end up with an Elder Helmet, which makes like a pseudo 6-link for one of the gems, and then put the other 6-link in your chest piece. So you end up with 2 6-links on this build. Pretty cool build in that regard. And yeah, you just gotta run through packs with your big fire circle and kill everything. And there are like explode versions of this build that do really nice on clear, do a lot of damage as well. I've seen some really fast variations of Righteous Fire Inquisitor, and it's just a really solid build, super new player friendly as well, and has one of the best build guides for any build in the game I've ever seen. So Pohx did an amazing job with that, so yeah, can't recommend this one enough. It's a great build. It's also the most popular build in 3.18, so definitely a solid one. Okay, next up is Subtractem's Bane Occultist. So I league started this once. It was pretty good. Its clear is really nice. I mean, it's just naturally how Bane works, and because of the damage scaling, you can apply an additional curse with Occultist Ascendancy, and then you want to take like Whispers of Doom on it to apply 3 curses, and then you get a ton of damage scaling off of Bane with those curses linked to Bane, and you're able to apply all the curses at the same time. As you can see above the monsters, they're getting 3 curses applied to them, and then just getting absolutely blown up with Bane, and it's very quick mapper relative to other league starters, because you know, you just get that giant Bane circle thrown on a pack and the pack gets deleted basically. So this obviously doesn't scale really well into late game mapping, like juiced mapping, where you have just tons of packs of monsters all around you all the time, whereas that little circle isn't going to cover the whole screen all the time, right? But when you're just doing regular maps, like regular tier 16 non-juiced stuff, Bane Occultist is really good at taking care of the packs in those type of maps. So pretty much ideal for a league start scenario, right? That's which one. As you can see here, not the best single target, kind of goes like that usually for a lot of the time. You're kind of just throwing out your little essence drain on monsters. You do get the advantage of eventually having a double 6-link setup, so you could have 1 6-link setup for Bane for clear, and you'll have 1 setup for essence drain to throw on single target. It does do a lot of damage eventually, but this build also kind of struggles on no gear. Once it gets to about red maps, the essence drain damage is going to kind of fall off without some gear investment. That being said, it goes super smooth up to red maps. It's basically, you basically need no gear to really blast through the game, and it's not too much gear investment to really go past it and start burning down the red map bosses and everything. And it's just really nice mapping early on. It's not the tankiest thing in the world. It's definitely good enough, and with a little bit of investment, you can get through the whole game. I would basically play this build just as a league starter, and then you'd want to transition to something else, as this isn't not going to be the most efficient clear. Single target's going to get you through, be able to get you all your void stones with little no investment, and it's just going to be a really solid build. Nothing really compares to it on a budget as far as just getting through the maps and blowing up packs really quickly. It's actually very smooth for doing single target and bossing, because I don't know if you could see in these videos, but the single target is coming from the little purple dot that comes out, and that's the single target damage. You just throw it on the boss and it's just going to do a dot to him, and you can just sit back and run around and dodge stuff and do mechanics pretty much until you have to put the dot back on, which for most boss fights is going to be either just 1 or 2 applications of the dot, and they're going to die as long as you have pretty good gear. So it's really nice in that regard. And then you can also use Blight and throw on some withered debuffs onto the target as well. And yeah, it's just a whole bunch of chaos dot damage all the time on everything. And yeah, it's just a really smooth build. As you can see, you know, you could just map like this with Bane right out of the gate, and you're going to have a really good time on it. So definitely a really solid league starter. Does not scale very well into the late game is the one downside. You can, but I would say you're probably better off taking a different direction with a better scaling build. Once you get through the axe, once you get all your void stones, and once you start farming a little bit of currency, maybe get 10, 15, 20x, you probably want to start looking at doing a different build. But to start out the game, it is just insanely smooth mapper, really easy, really casual, just running through blown up packs, easy peasy. Alright, so up next we have the accuracy stacking Juggernaut. Now, Some of you guys might be wondering why this is on the list as a league starter, and it is very difficult to league start this build. This is probably going to take maybe not the highest cost, but the highest amount of time to get online as a league starter, as you need quite a few uniques. It's basically almost all uniques for this build to get it online, but once it's online, it's actually insane, and that's really all you need, and that's part of the reason I have it listed here as a league starter build. But the uniques aren't expensive, really. You need an Obscurantis helmet, you need a Hinocor's Sight amulet, which are really cheap uniques, and then really the two things you'll have maybe a little bit of trouble getting right away are going to be the Replica Last Resort Nail Fist Claws, which have to come from Heist, and I think they have to come from blueprints from Heist, so you have to wait for people to do Heist blueprints, which will happen pretty quickly, but you know, the supply is going to be low and demand is going to be high right away, so that might be a little difficult to get. I would probably do Infinite Heist if I were going to do this character, and then just buy those items once people acquire them, and probably pay a premium for buying them early. But once you get them, your build is basically online. And then the other thing actually you need that's going to take some time to get on the market is going to be your boots. Your windbreak, your accuracy stacking, rare boots that you're going to have to get. So this is really more of a day 2, day 3 build, but you could play either something like General Scribe Berserker, or I would also recommend playing maybe just a slam build until you can go to this. You can play slams all the way through to yellow maps on like a 4-link with no gear, and then transition to this day 2, maybe day 3 at the latest. But once you're there, it is the fastest mapper in the builds that we've listed here. It is by far the fastest mapper. As you see from the video here, you just whirling blades through the map. You have like 10 attacks per second with whirling blades, so you can't even move as fast as you could press the button to move, basically, with how fast it can go. And it's just going to fly through maps. It's really good if you want to do like a speed mapping style early on and get through a lot of maps. Maybe you're farming essences. You want to get to all your free essences in every map, pick them up, get on to the next map, boom, 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 really quick. Maybe doing a boss rushing style of farming early on. It's going to be really good at that. This is a build I've league started a couple leagues, and it's been really, really good. Usually I do play either General's Cry or maybe the Slam build like I talked about before I go into this one. I've even leveled it as a second character like day 2 just to play this build because it's that good early on. But that being said, this is also another build we're looking out for. It's on our radar for potential nerfs, really just because it uses Lightning Strike and Nightblade. So if those two things get nerfed, we're doubting this build. We're doubting playing this build, but, you know, we'll wait and see what happens and we'll adjust accordingly. But that being said, it is amazing. It's an amazing mapper early on, and as you can tell, you might notice a difference between this and the speed of the other builds that I put on this list. It is by far the fastest mapper, and it's just a really, really solid build. One of my favorites, really. It's kind of low-key under the radar. I don't know why, but some people that I've talked to have kind of said, oh, it's not that good, but it is definitely very, very good. I've played it and I've recommended it to a lot of people, and everybody that plays it says, wow, this thing is really good. Also, the other thing to note about this build is you can get your Void Stones really easily with this build. You can do Maven, no problem. You can do Uber Elder, no problem. And you can do it really cheap. Once you can get the gear isn't really expensive. It just takes a while to come on the market is all. And that just makes it an extremely solid league starter. Alright guys, so let's talk about Poisonous Concoction, Occultist, or Pathfinder. It's a little trickier to league start this on Occultist, as you need some chance to poison nodes that are kind of across the tree, and you also don't get access to the Poisonous Concoction gem as early as you do on Pathfinder. So you'll have to do like Act 3 Library on Occultist, which is going to slow you down a little bit in your leveling progression, right? But not much at all, maybe like 5-10 minutes. Not really a big deal for the vast majority of players to switch into that. You won't be able to switch into it right away, so you'll have to do more of a chaos damage skill leveling stuff early on with some early chaos spell skills, which I forget which ones you use, but the guide that I have linked covers that as far as leveling with Occultist. So just be aware of that. You're going to have to switch into Poisonous Concoction a little bit later than you will with Pathfinder, but not really a big deal. So what are the benefits and drawbacks of Occultist versus Pathfinder? Well, honestly, they're very, very similar. There aren't really a whole lot of differences in the power of either one against each other. The Occultist is going to, of course, have the explosions from Profane Bloom, which is really nice, but the Pathfinder is a little bit faster in maps. So Occultist is going to have a little more clear, a little bit more ease of clearing with the explosions, but the Pathfinder is going to be faster in general, so they both kind of add up to having faster clear, right, in their own way. So they're both really good on clear, and they both have ways of making the clear better in different ways for each ascendancy. And the single target seem to be about the same. I think Occultist ends up having more single target scaling than Pathfinder does, but from what I played on early game gear into red maps, they were both about the same. Didn't really notice a massive difference in the single target. But the other thing about this build is it is extremely good on a budget. This character you're looking at, this is the Pathfinder version, by the way. If you want to see some Occultist gameplay, you can go look at my video on what I'm planning to League start in 3.19. Basically, I had it narrowed down to either this or Juggernaut's card Blade Flurry, but I would be playing the Occultist version just because I prefer it. Yeah, I think the Occultist version has a little bit better late game scaling though, and other than that, they're very similar. This isn't a super good scaling skill. It doesn't go really well in the late game. It's pretty good scaling. It's a lot better than some of the other things on this list, but it's not amazing, right? You don't want to be playing this a month into League, kind of similar to Explosive Arrow. It's really good to get the job done early, but you want to swap into something else eventually. That being said, it is extremely good on budget gear. The gear you're looking at here is nothing but rare items. It doesn't require any uniques, it does not require a weapon, it does not require any cluster jewels, and it can clear the entire game on nothing but rares with life and resistance. Again, if you look at the other video, I showcased the Occultist version. This one's doing a little bit lower tier maps, but the Occultist version was doing tier 16s with the same exact gear I had on the Pathfinder here. I literally just moved all the gear off the Pathfinder, threw it on the Occultist, and started doing tier 16 maps on the Occultist. So it's absolutely amazing. I think it's probably one of the best builds in the game, or one of the best builds I've played as far as being able to do tier 16 maps on absolutely no gear. The bossing is a little bit weak, so keep that in mind, but as long as you just stick to maps and find a way to get your void stones early enough, and just stick to maps, you're going to be doing really good. It's really great for things like Expedition as well. Alright, so the last one on our list here is going to be Lightning Strike Berserker, or Champion, or Raider. All three are really good. There's pros and cons to each. I guess we could talk about the pros and cons. I think I'm only going to include Kobe's Lightning Strike version guide to follow for this one, as I just think Berserker is the best. There are advantages and disadvantages to each one. You could argue the pros and cons of each one. I don't think there's like, one is just extremely superior to the other. I just prefer Berserker, and that's what I recommend to people usually. But I'll just go through the pros and cons real quick since we're talking about it. Berserker is going to have higher boss damage and higher burst than just about anything else. Raider is going to have a little bit faster speed and get that ailment immunity through the ascendancy much easier. And then Champion is just going to be tankier but slower. So basically that's it. Berserker is basically in between Raider and Champion on speed, but does more damage than either one of them. Raider is a little bit faster and has that ailment immunity in the ascendancy kit, and a little bit of suppress as well. And then a Champion is going to be the tankiest but the slowest of all three. So that's basically the analysis of the different Lightning Strike ascendancies you can play. Like I said, I would recommend Berserker. It's typically my favorite. The guide I'm going to be putting up for this one is going to be Kobe's Lightning Strike Berserker. That's one I've followed in the past. Really good skill, really good build. I haven't followed a League start version of the Berserker. I would prefer, probably, honestly, I know this one's a little bit tricky to get to end game. You need like a really nice claw, so it can be kind of hard to farm the currency to craft one, or to craft one while you're progressing your character through maps, as they can be kind of expensive. They're in very high demand, a lot of people want them, and recombinators are also going away, making it a lot harder to get a nice claw in 3.19. And also, I'll mention this since I mentioned it for the other builds, we're Lightning Strike with Nightblade on this build as well, so we are looking at a potential nerf in 3.19 for this, so be on the lookout for that if you're thinking about playing this build. But, that being said, it's really good and has probably some of the best scaling out of any build. It just can be a little bit difficult getting it going and getting the items you need early, like I said, as in they're in very high demand because it's a very popular build early on. But once you get it going, it's something you're going to want to play the whole league. It's got really higher scaling potential as far as all-around build than anything else in this list. It's going to map really nice. You're going to be able to do super juiced maps. You're going to be able to do Wave 30 simulacrums on it. You're going to be able to do basically anything on it. It's not going to excel more than anything else on this list. Like, it's not going to boss as well as Seismic Trap will. but it will be able to do the entire end game, probably even Uber bosses, although I didn't really do Uber bosses on my Lightning Strike Berserker. But it ends up being super tanky and super high damage, but we'll see, It could get some nerfs. It's a build I've played extensively, and along with everything else in this list, except for really Skelly Mages and Seismic Trap, I would say, and maybe Explosive Arrow. Yeah, you could come ask me any questions you have about this build, and I'm a little bit of a Lightning Strike Berserker expert, so if your build's having a little trouble, having some problems with it, you can come ask me about what to do with your build. A little bit more about the build. Becomes a really good mapper. You can scale it up to do juice content. It's a little similar to like Corrupting Fever, and that it's going to be pretty solid early on for a while, but once you get to red maps and stuff, you're probably going to really want those big upgrades for it, and it's going to be a little difficult getting all those big upgrades and getting it to end game for cheap. It's probably more for a more advanced player type of build to League start, but you can do it. It needs a few big upgrades to really start doing damage. Big damage like the Claw is really big. It needs some cluster jewels, that kind of thing. Maybe a Thread of Hope is really helpful. You need to get Pierce with some gloves, or, you know, it just needs a lot of things to really excel in the end game. But once it gets to the end game, it scales really, really well and can really turn to an end game monster if you can get through kind of the struggles of League starting it. But it is League start viable, and that's why I included it on this list. But the big advantage of it is it's going to scale really, really well in the end game. You're going to be able to do all kinds of super end game farming on it, no problem. And then if you get a Headhunter or some Inspired Learnings, it's going to be really nice too. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this one. There's a couple things before I go. If you have any questions or anything, come by the Discord. I've played most of all these builds, so if you're having any trouble or having any questions, concerns, thoughts about these builds, send me a DM and I'll talk to you about them, maybe help you out a little bit, see what we can figure out for you. And yeah, I think it's going to do it for this one, and thanks for watching.